Alright, what is going on? Today we are back with another stream. We are reacting to our good old friend Mr. Nightmare. It's been a while since we've reacted to him. Actually, let me check when I last reacted to him, actually. Let me just check real quick. Plug in my channel. By the way, subscribe, hit like button. When was it? 3 weeks ago. Wow. 3 weeks ago. That is insane. But, so yeah, I have some, so I think I have some banger videos lined up. Got some new ones. Let's start off with Easter horror stories. Even though it's already passed, I know. We can still react to it, you know, it's fine. Let's go. No, thank you, Mr. Nightmare. I won't become a member. Sorry. A bit dark. But you know what?
This happened when I was a little kid, maybe 6 or 7. My family has always been very religious, so Easter has always been a huge deal for us. Same with most of the other major religious holidays. Now that I think of it, even Sunday kind of felt like its own holiday with the way my parents treated church. It's actually kind of funny. Some of my earliest memories are church-related. What I'm about to tell you is one of them. It was Easter Sunday, so all the services are much longer than usual. I don't mind though. My parents instilled the love of Christ in me very early on. After the service was Sunday school, or CCD as our church called it. I know lots of churches don't offer Sunday school after really important masses, but ours did. So, after the mass, my parents took me downstairs to all the classrooms like they had done 100 times, and I said goodbye. I'm just going to describe the layout of the church now so this story makes sense.
Oh god, you know a story's getting scary when they describe the layout of some place. That's how you know right now.
The church had kind of a split-level layout.
Whoops.
The main sanctuary was upstairs where the altar and pews were, and then all the classrooms were in the basement. It was technically a basement, but the church was on a slope. You could still get in and out of the building from down there. There was this long carpeted hallway down there with maybe 7 or 8 rooms branching off on each side, grouped by age. My classroom was one of the first ones on the left. At the very end of the hallway were the 2 bathrooms, one for boys and one for girls. Right next to those was a heavy gray door that led outside. It was almost always locked from the inside, but I remember being told it could be used in case of an emergency.
It's a horse outside or something. Something's like banging outside. Well, I actually might be downstairs, actually. Yeah, I might be downstairs.
The adults always warned us to never leave from that door because it would automatically lock behind us, and we'd have no way of getting back inside the church. But anyway, back to the story. The whole downstairs had been decorated for Easter, like really decorated. The walls were covered in pastel streamers and little paper cutouts of lambs and crosses, and there were drawings of Jesus like with kids taped up between the classroom doors. Some of the teachers had even worn these cheap bunny ears you get at CVS. It actually felt more festive down there than it had upstairs during Mass. All the kids were in a good mood too, probably because everyone knew there'd be egg hunts later in the day. Normally I'd wait until class was over to go to the bathroom, but because the Easter service had run way longer than usual masses, and I couldn't hold it, I raised my hand and asked to go, and the teacher excused me from the room. The bathrooms were maybe 15 feet down the hall, and it wasn't uncommon for kids to go by themselves. They always said if we took too long, they'd come check, but I don't remember that ever actually happening. So I slipped out quietly while the rest of the class was coloring pictures of the empty tomb and Jesus rising from it. I went into the boys' bathroom and shut the stall door behind me. It was quiet, but those bathrooms were old. All I could hear was the soft hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint sound of a teacher's voice echoing down the hallway. But as I was sitting there, I suddenly heard this weird scraping sound coming from the stall next to mine. It didn't sound like anything normal, not like someone shifting or unlocking a door.
R.I.P.
It was the slow, uneven metal sound, like something was being dragged or scraped against the inside of the door. Not loud, but sharp. I don't remember being scared. I was mostly just confused. At first, I thought it was another kid, so I kept quiet and finished up my business. As I was washing my hands, though, I looked into the mirror and saw that stall door opening slowly. But instead of another kid stepping out, it was a grown man wearing an Easter Bunny costume.
Nope.
I remember the way the ears flopped forward a little, and how the suit looked off. It was kind of saggy and stained in places, like it hadn't been washed ever. The fur was more of a grayish white than a bright white, and one of the eyes on the head looked like it had been sewn back on crooked. But the thing is, I don't remember being scared when I saw him. Not then. Like I said, I was pretty young, and in my mind, this was just the Easter Bunny making a surprise visit. I actually smiled when I turned around. I think I even said something like, "Hi." He didn't say anything at first, just stood there halfway out of the stall, staring at me. His head was tilted slightly, and he didn't move. I remember feeling a little awkward, like I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say something else. Then, after a long pause, he stepped all the way out and slowly raised one of his arms, pointing towards the door like he was guiding me out. That's when he finally spoke. His voice was muffled behind the costume, but I still remember the exact words. He said, "You're the lucky chosen child. I have a gift for you, outside." I didn't even hesitate. I was excited, like genuinely thrilled at the idea that I'd been picked for some kind of special Easter surprise. I think the fact that this was happening in my church gave me a false sense of security or something. I pushed open the big gray door without thinking twice, not even remembering that it was supposed to stay locked. The Easter Bunny followed right behind, not saying anything else. He started walking across the pavement toward the far corner of the church parking lot. There was a car parked back there, mostly hidden from view by the dumpster and a few scraggly bushes. I remember thinking it was weird that he had parked so far away, and that he didn't even have a basket of candy or anything. At one point, he started holding my hand. We were maybe halfway across the lot when I saw it. A second Easter Bunny stepping out from a car he was leading me to. At first, I just stopped walking. My little brain didn't know what to make of it. I remember looking back and forth between the two of them, completely confused. I hadn't seen that car earlier, and now there were two Easter Bunnies? Something about it didn't feel magical anymore. It just felt wrong. To this day, I've always thought of what happened next as an act of God. One of the teachers, I think her name was Miss Sabrina, just happened to be walking around the church.
Sabrina Carpenter worked there? What? That's insane.
Maybe heading out to prep for the egg hunt or check on something outside. She looked over at the parking lot right as I was being led over to the car. I'll never forget the sound she made. I've never heard a more terrifying scream in my life. The man in the costume immediately let go of my hand and bolted for the car, and without thinking, I took off running in the opposite direction toward Miss Sabrina. Once I was safe in her arms, I turned my head just in time to catch a glimpse of the car, which was now speeding out of the parking lot. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure I saw another kid in the back seat of that car. Miss Sabrina wasn't even looking, but I told her what I had seen and she took me seriously. The next few hours are a little blurry. Miss Sabrina alerted the other adults right away, and police eventually made me tell them what happened. They asked about the kid I said I saw in the back seat, and I did my best to describe him, even though
Those are lame eggs. They look like giant kidney stones.
I'd only seen him for like a split second, and I wasn't even sure if my mind was playing tricks on me or not. My parents were the most upset, and for good reason. I think my mom cried for an hour straight after we went home. The police followed up with the church.
Moms do be dramatic sometimes, yeah. They do that.
But nothing ever came of it. There were no missing children in the area, so the police didn't really have anything to work on. The running theory was that whoever had been in that costume somehow had a key to the back door and just sat in the bathroom waiting for a kid to use it. And by sheer misfortune, that kid had been me. I still find the whole thing deeply unsettling. Whoever had done that must have been familiar with the church's layout. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known where to park or wait, or even how to get away with it all. But what scares me the most is that I think there really was a kid in the backseat of that car. It's hard for an Easter to come and go without me thinking about this experience.
Ryan.
I just graduated high school last year, which is when what I'm about to tell you took place. Easter has always been a fun time of the year for my friends and I,
What is
but
that?
not for the
What the hell's that? What's that? What is that Chernobyl looking dessert? What the hell is that? There's a hole in the middle. Someone penetrated the middle. It's got a filling inside now. Pause moment. And also there's cress right there. Cress. Caressing these nuts. Alright, let's keep going.
Reason you think. We've outgrown those childish Easter egg hunts that everyone does when they're little. And I honestly cringe when my parents make me participate in one with my younger cousins. A few years ago, I can't remember exactly
what. Mushroom? What the hell is that? That looks like a mushroom. That doesn't look like an egg, it looks like a mushroom. Power up.
When my friends and I created a fun twist on the typical egg hunt format and devised our own game. It's not really that special. It's basically just a mashup of manhunts and an Easter egg hunt. It's two teams like manhunts, but the Seekers are also responsible for hiding and protecting a few eggs. If the hiders manage to capture all the eggs, they win. And if the Seekers don't find all the hiders within a certain time frame, the hiders also win. There are some other dumb rules, like how the Seekers can't be camping where any of the eggs are hidden, and stuff like that. But that's not super relevant to the story. It was the Thursday before Easter, and school was canceled the next day for whatever reason. So we decided to have a sleepover that night. It was me, Jake, Race, Chuck, Arthur, and Raz. Raz wasn't actually his real name. His last name was Razzie, but everyone just called him Raz. His family had the biggest house by far, so we'd always chill there. He lived in the middle of nowhere, and his backyard bordered a decently sized wooded area. Plus, his parents were out of town until Friday night, so we'd have the place to ourselves. We were just chilling, playing video games in his basement, when Chuck suggested we play manhunts. We were all down, so we rounded up whatever flashlights Raz had in his garage. We used a random number generator on Jake's phone to pick random teams, just to keep it fair and unpredictable. I was on a team with Chuck and Raz, and we were seeking. Jake and Arthur were hiding. Raz's mom had a ton of plastic eggs upstairs, so we grabbed a couple of them and all of us went outside. We'd played back there a bunch of times before, so we already knew the layout. The far boundary was the fence line, and the other edges were the creek and the back slope that ran down towards Raz's neighbor's horse pasture. We set timers on our phones to give the hiders enough time to hide, and us enough time to hide our eggs. Once 10 minutes passed, the game had officially begun. I should also mention that the sun had already gone down, but it wasn't completely dark out yet. Once the timer went off, we all split up to cover more ground. I veered left into a thicker patch of trees while Raz and Chuck went the other way. I kept my hand over my flashlight, just skimming the ground every few steps so that I wouldn't trip, but I mostly relied on the moonlight to see. The game was way more fun when you actually felt like you were sneaking around. And besides, if one of the hiders saw a flashlight beam coming toward them, they'd just book it. A few minutes in, I thought I saw something move 20 or 30 feet in front of me. At first, I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but then I saw it again. I instantly turned my flashlight off and froze in place. Someone was crouching behind a tree up ahead. Whoever it was must not have seen me, otherwise they'd definitely have run off. They weren't moving, like they were trying to stay perfectly still. My first guess was that it was Race. He always picked spots close to the Seekers, thinking no one would expect it. I decided to try to get the jump on him. I crouched down a bit myself and started moving slowly, trying to circle around behind him. When I got close enough, I sprang forward and lunged at whoever was crouching there, tapping him hard on the shoulder and yelling, "Gotcha!" But the second he turned around, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. It wasn't any of my friends. It was a grown man with slicked back hair and these wide open eyes, like he was on drugs. His clothes were all torn up and he smelled awful. I was so taken aback that I didn't even realize what was going on. Before I could react, he tackled me to the ground. I screamed as I hit the dirt, but before I could yell out again, his hands were around my throat. He was pressing down with all his weight, and in that moment, I honestly thought my life was over. I couldn't breathe, and I didn't have the strength to overpower him from that position. And then, out of nowhere, he stopped. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flashlight beam bouncing off the trees somewhere behind us. One of my friends must have been running towards us. The guy must have seen the light too, because he jumped off without saying a word and straight up ran into the woods, disappearing almost immediately. I just laid there, gasping for air, still too stunned to move. A few seconds later, Chuck reached me, helped me up, and said he saw the whole thing. I wanted to chase after that guy, but Chuck told me that was an awful idea. So the two of us instead ran back towards the house. Chuck called the rest of the crew and told everyone to go back to Raz's house immediately. Once we all reconvened, I told everyone what happened. After Chuck filled in the rest of the gaps, everyone started talking over each other. But then, Arthur said something that shut all of us up. He said that before the game even started, meaning before the initial 10 minutes were up, he saw two people walking through the trees near where he was hiding. He said they were moving slowly, like they were scouting or waiting for something, and he'd actually gotten pissed at the time because he thought it was two of the Seekers teaming up and breaking the rules. That's when me, Chuck, and Raz all looked at each other and immediately shook our heads. None of us had been walking together, and there was no way we could have gotten all the way to their side in such a short time frame anyway. The realization hit us all at once. If it wasn't any of us, then there were at least 3 other people out in those woods that night. One who attacked me, and 2 more who were moving around before the game had even started. In that moment, I realized how smart I had been for listening to Chuck and not chasing after my attacker. He might have saved me from walking headfirst into an ambush. I told everyone we needed to call the cops. I had literally been attacked. But the second I said it, Raz cut me off. He got weirdly serious and said, "No, we're not calling anyone." I asked him what in the world he was talking about, and he said he was technically grounded, and beyond that, he wasn't allowed to host anyone while his parents were out of town, so involving the cops would get him in serious hot water. I told him this was a serious situation and worth involving the police.
What else is this kid smoking? Oh, we can't call the cops because I'm grounded. Your friend got strangled, buddy. This is definitely worth calling the cops over. I want what he's smoking. That must be some heavy stuff right now.
He didn't budge. The rest of the guys were kind of stuck
give him a good old punch.
In the middle. No one wanted to
good old Hawaiian punch.
Put Raz in a bad spot with his parents.
The drink, by the way, for all the boomers watching.
But I could tell that they were all having a hard time just pretending that the whole thing didn't happen. Eventually, I caved and agreed to not call the police and try to just enjoy the rest of the night. But I was seriously shaken. I ended up going to bed early that night and left Raz's house the next morning before anyone else was awake. This might surprise some of you, but I actually wasn't too affected by this experience. Good. I'm very much of the mentality that things happen and people have to move on, so that's what I did. Anyway, about a week after everything went down, Raz told us all that he felt bad just leaving those Easter eggs out in the woods, so he had gone to collect them even though he was scared out of his mind. We all got a good laugh out of that, but his comment made me think back to that night and contemplate my life a little. I have no idea what those men were doing in those woods that night, but I can confidently say that I won't be spending the night at Raz's place anytime soon. Anyway, I'm at college now and I'm far, far away from Raz's backyard. But being as Easter is coming up next month, I got reminded of this story.
Hellcats. Not as good as Monster Cat, though.
Every Easter, my entire extended family takes the trip out to my Uncle John's house, who lives way out in the sticks. This past year was no different.
In the sticks.
Uncle John lives in a huge
sticks.
house that sits on a wide open stretch of land, which is surrounded by woods on all sides. Even though I've been there before, many times actually, I've never actually wandered out in the woods behind his house before. I'm not much of a nature person, so I've never had much of an interest in the outdoors.
Me neither.
I was dreading the trip, to tell you the truth. I've never really related much to that side of my family. They're all super outdoorsy, into hunting and fishing and stuff like that, and most of them have lived in the same place their whole lives. Anytime I'm around them, I feel kind of like the odd one out. On top of that, most of my cousins are way older than me, like already married with kids or working on some kind of farm, The only one even remotely close to my age is Kevin. He's a couple years older than me, and actually pretty chill.
Look at her freaking hair. Alright, there we go. I start to adjust my hair real quick.
We always end up sticking together during these family trips just by default. He knows I don't really fit in with the rest of them, so he's usually good about keeping me company without making it weird. Anyway, we made the drive to Uncle John's late Friday night. I'm an only child, so it was just my parents and I in the car. I was exhausted from the drive, so I went to bed almost immediately. The next morning, Kevin and I spent a couple hours in Uncle John's basement playing pool table. Neither of us was any good, but it was better than sitting around upstairs. The house was already packed with relatives by then. You know what the usual holiday chaos is like. We mostly stayed downstairs, low-key avoiding it all. There wasn't a TV down there, so Kevin played some music off his phone, and the two of us talked about some dumb family drama not even worth mentioning here. While we played, Kevin kept going on about the woods behind Uncle John's house. He said they stretched out for miles, and that hardly anyone ever went far enough to see the cool stuff out there. He talked about how magical it felt, and how beautiful the isolation was. I mostly just nodded along. Nature talk wasn't really my thing, but he clearly loved it. I'm not sure how, but later that day, Kevin convinced me to go on a nature walk with him. Like I said, I'm not a nature person by any means, but I was quite literally dying of boredom, which is probably why I agreed to tag along. We obviously told Uncle John where we were going. He's a really nice guy and always lets us younger people do what we want, a mentality I wish my own parents shared. Kevin took the lead once we got outside, cutting across the backyard and into the tree line like he'd done it 100 times before, which, knowing him, he probably had. The woods were thick, but not totally wild. There was a kind of natural path that Kevin was following. It wasn't late in the day, so I wasn't super worried about the sun setting. But the deeper we went, the more I started to wonder how we were going to find our way back. After about 20 minutes of walking, I asked Kevin if he was sure he knew where we were, and he just laughed. He told me he knew these woods like the back of his hand, and that he'd been exploring them since he was a kid. We'd been walking for maybe another 20 minutes when we both stopped at the same time. From somewhere up ahead, we heard this loud thunk, like something heavy slamming into wood. It didn't sound like an animal or
my teacher. Hey.
someone stepping on a branch. It was reoccurring, like a pause, then another hit, then another pause and another hit. It sounded like a hammer or mallet being driven against a tree. That's the best way I can describe it. Kevin looked at me, and I could tell he was trying to figure it out too. That sound didn't sound too close, but it was loud enough to be clear. He told me it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that a hunter was wandering around in there, but even so, he definitely looked a little startled. Eventually, the sound stopped. I asked if he wanted to turn back, but he shook his head. I could tell he was curious now, and I'll admit I was kind of too. So we kept walking the direction we thought the sound had come from, both on high alert. We'd only been walking for a few more minutes when Kevin suddenly stopped and held his arm out in front of me. I froze, thinking maybe he'd seen someone in front of us, but then he pointed up into the trees. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing, but then it hit me. There were 3 upside-down crosses nailed into 3 adjacent trees, way higher up than anyone could have reached without a ladder. Easily 15, maybe 20 feet off the ground. Before we could even turn to leave, I saw movement out of the corner.
Imagine Mr. Nightmare's search history. Cross on tree.
Of my eye. I whipped my head around, and to my horror, there was a person standing there. He was dressed like a lumberjack, with a thick beard and a very dark stare. Kevin stepped in front of me, partially shielding me from the guy's view. He stared at me specifically and said, "You shouldn't be here." Kevin immediately apologized to the guy and told him we were just leaving, which is actually what we did. That guy didn't move as we left. He just stared us down as we walked back the way we had come. I could feel my hands shaking. We walked back the whole way in silence, and I've never experienced a more tense moment in my life. The two of us kept turning around, trying to make sure we weren't being followed, but there was no way to tell for sure. When we finally made it back to the house, we told Uncle John first thing. Like I said, he's a friendly guy and he knows all his neighbors, so I got a sick feeling in my stomach when he said no one he knew matched our description of the guy in the woods. He asked us a bunch of times if we had been followed, and we told him no. There wasn't much else for any of us to do. Someone floated the idea of arming up and sweeping the woods, but Uncle John wanted to avoid confrontation and didn't want to lead anyone to his house. So Kevin and I went back downstairs to chill, and the rest of our relatives went back to whatever they'd been doing, likely planning for the Easter festivities. That whole encounter messed with my head way more than I let on. I ended up going to bed pretty early that night, just to get my mind off of it. But because of that, I woke up way earlier than usual. Like, way earlier. I rolled over, checked my phone, and saw that it was just after 5 a.m. The sun had just barely started poking over the horizon, but it was still mostly dark out. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. So I just decided to get an early start to my day. Uncle John has a study on the 3rd floor of his house, so I decided to go up there and see if there were any interesting books to read. Uncle John's study has this big old window that overlooks the entire backyard. As I walked past it, something caught my eye. There was a very faint, flickering glow coming from the edge of the woods. It looked like the pulsing light of a small fire, not a flashlight or anything that bright. I stood there for a good 30 seconds just staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Curiosity got the better of me, and I needed to know what I was looking at. So I went downstairs and stepped out onto the back deck. When I realized what I was looking at, I had to literally fight back a scream. There were at least 3 figures standing just past the edge of the woods, each holding a small torch. They weren't walking or moving around. They were just standing there, facing the house, facing me. I ran straight to Uncle John's room and woke him up, telling him what I saw. Without any questions, he grabbed his rifle, threw on a pair of pants, and told me to stay inside. He marched out onto the back deck and scanned the yard while I watched from the doorway. By that time, though, those people had retreated back into the woods. Without hesitation, he aimed his rifle up into the air and fired it 3 times. That woke up the whole house, and the next 20 minutes or so was complete chaos. I'll just tell you that I can't think of a worse way to spend an Easter morning. The whole holiday was kind of ruined after that, and everyone was on edge for the entire day. Eventually, it came time for my parents and I to leave, and I can't say I was upset about it. This was like 9 months ago, and Uncle John has since told us that he hasn't seen or experienced anything strange. Still though, I would hate to be living in that house, knowing there are psychos lurking somewhere nearby. I'll send an update should Uncle John tell us anything of note.
Alright, that is it for that one. Let's see, what could we do? Ooh, with video footage, nice. Let's do that one. That's good.
Mark was a college student living in Indiana. His house was quiet and sat next to some woods. During the day, everything felt normal, but at night, the woods made the place feel strange.
Well,
behind his house, under the patio, there was a hot tub. That's where everything happened. It was Saturday night, March 29th, around 12:30 a.m. Spring break was ending and school was starting again soon. Mark had his 3 close friends over, Kyle, Keenan, and Derek. They were spending one last night hanging out. They were in the garage playing pool, blasting music, and drinking. Everyone was laughing and having fun. It felt like a good night. After a while, Kyle said they should go in the hot tub. It was cold outside, so the warm water sounded even better. Everyone agreed. They got changed into swim trunks, grabbed their drinks, and went into the hot tub. The warm water felt good as they talked, made jokes, and didn't pay attention to the time. Then they heard something. It was the sound of sticks breaking, like footsteps coming from the woods. It didn't sound like an animal, it sounded like a person. They all went quiet and looked around. Keenan tried to calm everyone down and said it was probably nothing. The others laughed, but it was more to stop feeling nervous. They turned the music up louder and tried to keep talking. About 10 minutes later, a man walked out of the woods. He stepped into the light from the patio. He was wearing a long black coat, white sweatpants, and a gaming headset. His eyes were wide, and his face didn't show any feeling. Everyone jumped. They yelled at him and asked who he was and what he was doing. The man raised his hands and said his name was Seth. He said he was 33 years old, and he heard them laughing and wanted to join. The guys just looked at each other, confused. Mark told him to leave, but he didn't listen. Instead, Seth took off his coat, then his shoes, and then his pants.
Also, he's got low battery, by the way. I know it's not relevant, I just want to point out.
He was now in only his underwear.
Oh,
then he got into the hot tub.
Actually, it's probably
No
insane,
one knew
probably.
what to say. Mark pulled out his phone and started recording, not for fun, but because the whole thing felt unreal. This was the footage he captured.
Wait, I saw the drink right there. What was over here?
They started asking Seth questions, like where he came from and if he knew anyone there. He just kept saying he heard them laughing and wanted to hang out. Then he said something really disturbing. He said he had molested a child.
Nope. That is 999 trillion nopes. In fact, I'm going to be the center of attention now.
That changed everything, obviously. The guys jumped out of the hot tub and started yelling at him to leave. They pulled him out of the water. Seth didn't try to stop them. He just stood there, dripping wet and staring. Then he slowly walked back into the woods without saying anything. The group ran inside and locked all the doors. Some of them laughed nervously, trying to shake it off, but Mark and Kyle didn't feel okay. They felt like it wasn't over. About 15 minutes passed. Kyle said they should go back out to lock the hot tub. Mark said okay. So they got flashlights and stepped outside. That's when Mark saw something next to the hot tub. It was a phone. He picked it up and saw the screen light up. Whatever was on the lock screen made him drop the phone. He didn't say what it was, but it scared him. He said he thought Seth would come back, so they ran inside and told the others. Everyone tried to stay calm. Then they heard a tapping sound on the window. Mark already knew who it was. He opened the curtain, and wouldn't you know it, Seth was standing right there. His face was pale, his eyes were wide open, and he had a creepy smile. He didn't say anything, he didn't move, he just stared. Mark yelled for Kyle. Kyle ran in and called the police. Mark grabbed a bat and went to the front door. He yelled for Seth to leave and take his phone. Seth didn't answer. Instead, he slowly walked around the side of the house. Mark followed a little bit and looked through the patio window. Seth was standing there again, staring inside. Mark told him the cops were coming and that he needed to leave, but Seth didn't move. He just slowly raised his hand and waved once. Then he turned and walked back into the woods. The police arrived a few minutes later. The guys told them everything. The officers searched the woods and found Seth standing alone, just looking toward the house. They arrested him for trespassing, and everyone thought it was over. But Mark didn't feel that way. A few days later, he saw a post on Snapchat from a girl who lived nearby.
Can't hear me very well. What do you mean? Alright, well, whatever, it's fine.
It was a video. It showed another man, not Seth, trying to break into her house late at night. That's what bothered Mark the most. It meant Seth might not be the only one out there. There could be more. They could be connected, and they might not be done. A few years ago, 3 high school friends named Beck, Matthew, and Tyler decided to explore a sewer tunnel in their neighborhood. It was winter and very cold outside. The tunnel was at the edge of their neighborhood, under a small creek next to some office buildings. These buildings were empty and dark at night. The boys had seen the tunnel before, but never went inside of it. It always looked creepy, and they joked about it, but deep down they were curious. That night, they finally decided to go in. They brought sleds with them, thinking it would help if someone asked what they were doing. They knew they weren't allowed to be there, but they wanted to do something exciting. Just as they pulled into the parking lot, a police car showed up. A police officer got out and asked what they were doing there. Someone had apparently seen them on the security camera. Tyler quickly said that they were just going sledding. The officer looked at them for a moment, then told them to leave. So they left, but only for a little while. After driving around for about 30 minutes, they came back. This time, they parked farther away, behind a building where no one could see them. They walked down a hill behind the buildings. They could see their breath in the cold, crisp air. They stood in front of the tunnel, noting how big, round, and completely dark inside it was. They turned on their flashlights and walked in.
Ooh, okay, here we go. Getting to the good stuff.
Yeah, look at that.
Am I big enough? I think I'm big enough.
Oh, look at the date, dude. 6/19/19. 19. Oh my god, this is
That's a
dude, how did we even
69.
find this? Oh my
That's a 69. I think that's a 69, I think.
Inside the tunnel, the ground was dry. It was quiet, except for the sound of water dripping deeper in. The walls had graffiti all over them. Most of it looked old, but one thing caught their eye. A date was spray painted in large red numbers. 6/19/19. The paint looked newer than the rest, like it was done recently. That made them feel uneasy. Their flashlights weren't very strong and didn't shine very far. Still, they kept walking and acting tough,
You need the
but
world's
deep down
brightest
they were nervous.
flashlight.
The farther they went, the colder it got. The temperature was dropping fast. Even though they were underground, they could
Said
still see their
Kyle
breath. The walls looked like they had ice on them. Big icicles hung down from the ceiling. Some were huge and sharp.
Keep it slow, keep it slow.
Oh, it's like a light on
I
there.
see a light down there, see it?
See that? It's like a light.
I think I saw movement. Wait.
It's a weird light.
What's that?
Still there.
Hello? So keep going? Do we keep going?
Ah, yeah. Keep going. And there's a light up ahead. You don't know what it is.
Dude, and these icicles can like impale you, dude. Look how long.
Suddenly, a loud cracking sound echoing from further down the tunnel sends the group fleeing in fear. The sound resembled something heavy hitting stone. It wasn't any of them. The sound came from deeper inside the tunnel, too far to see. They
Turn up the mic.
tripped, slid, and bumped into each other as they rushed to get out. When they got outside, they were shaking and breathing hard. That's when Beck noticed his phone was missing. He had dropped it while they were running. Tyler and Matthew told him to forget about it. They didn't want to go back in, but Beck didn't listen. He grabbed his flashlight and started walking toward the tunnel again. The others followed, but they didn't want to. The tunnel felt different this time. It felt even darker. The air felt heavy and strange, like something was wrong. Their flashlights didn't work as well, and the silence was even worse than before. It felt like something was watching them.
I feel like my pocket got like a little emptier over here, like somewhere over here. Matthew, go over here this way. No, dude, that's when we fucking heard the noise. Shit, dude, do I have to go back there? Yeah. You're going first, bro. We're not leading the way. Yeah, somebody else lead the way, please. No, it's your phone.
At some point off camera, Beck found his phone. Afterwards, the group continued deeper into the tunnel investigating. And that's when they heard a sound.
That rock? It must have hit like here or something. What was it? Do you remember?
A loud scream came from deeper in the tunnel. It echoed off the walls and felt like it was getting closer. They didn't wait. They turned and ran as fast as they could. This time, no one talked, no one looked back. They just ran. They got to the car,
Finally,
jumped in,
you know,
and drove away without stopping.
Finally actually have some
The
brain
car ride
cells.
back was mostly silent. The three friends thought it was over when they all got home. They were ready to move on with their lives. But late that night, Beck's doorbell rang twice. This was at some off hour in the night. When Beck's dad went to answer the door, nobody was there. This, of course, begs the question, were the boys followed home that night? Or
Yes.
was it simply a very unfortunately timed ding-dong ditch? That remains a mystery. The night left more questions than answers for the three friends, but they all heard the noises and of course got it on video. Perhaps it was something they weren't meant to stumble upon.
Yeah, it was definitely a homeless person screaming in that tunnel to like scare them off because like they were in his home. Wasn't even kind of. Never mind. I couldn't even. I'm not even smart enough to catch it two-hand on camera.
In April of 2022, a man named Connor took a construction job far from home as part of a 3-month accommodation program. The pay was decent, and he needed every dollar. He wasn't in the best place financially, and the bonus of working alongside his longtime friend Jim made the opportunity more appealing. They figured it would be a nice change of pace, extra cash, time away from home, and some peace from the chaos of everyday life. The job itself wasn't bad. A few weeks in, Ryan had adjusted well to the routine, but the area they were stationed in was remote, deep in rural countryside. There were long, winding roads with barely any signs of life. It wasn't unusual to go miles without seeing a single home. Ryan had always loved the outdoors, and he saw this isolation as a chance to unplug. Most of his coworkers blew their weekends drinking, but Ryan had different plans. He wanted solitude. He wanted quiet. So when Friday rolled around, he packed his gear and prepared for a weekend of hiking and camping deep within the woods. A narrow trailhead just 5 minutes from his temporary accommodation became his entry point. Within 20 minutes, he was deep in the forest. The only sound was the wind and the crunch of his boots. He smoked a couple joints as he made his way further in, letting the stress just melt away. The isolation was comforting for him. Well, at first. Around 7 p.m., the sun began to sink behind the treetops. Shadows stretched long across the trail. Ryan knew it was time to find a place to settle. That's when he noticed something unusual. There was a scent in the air, burning firewood, and a light layer of smoke drifted between the trees. At first, it seemed normal.
Fires do
Maybe another
that in the
camper,
forest.
maybe a local.
Oh, those
But then,
are giant
he caught
Christmas
something
trees.
just barely in the corner of his vision. The faint orange glow of fire flickering through the trees. Curious and confident, Ryan left the trail and headed towards the source. He wasn't scared. He'd trained in combat sports during his teens and stayed in good shape. Still,
Look at
something
all those
about this
trees
felt
cut
off
down
to
for
him.
Oreos.
As he moved closer, he began to see strange metallic glints. Shopping carts, dozens of them.
Walmart's doing a cult. Walmart a cult before GTA 6? What? What's going on here?
Were tied to trees with rope hanging from the branches. Some mangled and suspended in bizarre positions,
Yep,
like
cult.
a twisted jungle gym
Cult.
of rusted steel. It didn't look like a campsite. It looked like a ritual site, like something
That
meant to
is
be
what it
seen
is.
and feared. Ryan pulled out his phone and started snapping photos. He had to prove this to his friends someday because no one would believe it otherwise. Then, something even stranger caught his eye. Hung directly above the fire was a charred, old-fashioned duck ornament. Sitting in the duck's back was a scorched baby doll. The thing was melted, its limbs warped from heat. Ryan took a photo of that too, but the longer he stared, he veered off the trail again, this time to gather supplies. He wasn't worried. He had emergency wood in his pack, but not enough to last the entire night.
Boy,
He needed
ain't
more.
safe. Someone come
After about an
get
hour of
him.
preparation, Ryan had set up his tent and built a small fire.
Yeah.
It was around 9 p.m. when he prepped a steak and potato meal in foil and nestled it in the glowing embers. He
Is this a
smoked
real
another joint to
food
dull the
video of the fire?
anxiety, and for a while, everything seemed okay again. With his meal finished and the fire crackling, Ryan settled in for the night. He turned on a pre-downloaded playlist of true crime podcasts, listening to
That's
cold
ironic.
case files
He's
as
in
the
a Mr.
forest around
Nightmare
him
story
darkened.
while listening
There was no
to a true
signal out
crime
there,
podcast.
no distractions, just firelight and static-filled voices recounting unsolved murders. At some point, he drifted off to
about to get
sleep,
murdered
but
soon.
it didn't last. He woke up suddenly. The air inside his tent felt colder. The fire outside had dimmed. He checked his phone. 4 a.m. He didn't know what had woken him up until he heard it. Whistling. A slow, eerie tune carried through the trees surrounding his camp. He froze. His body wouldn't move. It was like something inside him had shut down. He lay motionless, listening as the sound crept closer. Then the whistling stopped. What followed was worse. Soft footsteps. Fast, light, and quiet, circling his tent. He couldn't see them, but he could hear them crunching twigs and shifting leaves. His heart pounded in his throat. Then, without thinking, his body finally snapped into motion. He jumped up, threw on his boots, and burst out of the tent. What made it worse, what twisted the fear into something primal, was that the footsteps had come from the direction he had entered the trail. The way back to safety was now blocked. He had no choice but to run deeper into the forest. He sprinted as fast as he could, crashing through brush and low branches. But behind him, he could hear more footsteps, multiple, and they weren't in sync. The sounds overlapped, too fast and scattered to just be one person. There were two of them, maybe more. For 5 straight minutes, he ran until his lungs burned and his legs begged for rest. He found a dense cluster of trees and dove into the underbrush, burying himself in leaves and tangled roots. He didn't move. He barely breathed. The footsteps faded, distant now, but he didn't dare come out. He waited, still and silent in the dark. Eventually, he knew he had to move. He crawled through the forest with branches cutting into his arms and legs. Every step was slow and careful. When the trees finally began to thin, he broke into one final sprint. He recognized the trailhead, the way out, and he ran without stopping. No one followed him after that. The forest was quiet, but the damage was done. He got back to his accommodation and immediately reported the incident to the police. They took his statement and promised to investigate, but he never heard anything back. To this day, Ryan believes the people who chased him were the same ones who built that bizarre shrine of carts and dolls.
Oh, you think?
What they were doing out there and what they wanted, he doesn't know. But it was more than just a creepy encounter. To him, it felt ritualistic, cult-like. He finished his contract and returned home, but the memory never left him. He still remembers the sound of the footsteps, the whistling, and the feeling of helplessness. If there's anything to learn from this story, it would be to trust your instincts. If you find something that doesn't feel right, you should leave. Ryan almost didn't, and he knows he might not have lived to tell the story if he had stayed. This video was me experimenting with a slightly different style. If any of you have personal scary experiences that include photos or videos and you'd like to submit them, email them to me and I'll try to make this style of video a new series. Also, if you haven't already, click the bell icon and turn on all notifications.
Just like how you should do with this channel. ParrotToucan, subscribe. And turn the notification bell on, like. I said that in the beginning, but I just want to say it again. Let's do spring horror stories. Why not? Let's do spring.
I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. This happened a few years ago during a somewhat depressing period in my life. I had just broken up with my girlfriend of 5 years, the girl I thought I'd be marrying one day and starting a family with. It's safe to say I was pretty lost at that time. I can't lie, the psychological damage of the breakup was pretty severe. I spent entire weeks.
Got 10 minutes left, so I think we should skip to the last story. Because Mr. Nightmare always saves the best stories for last, so it will only make sense.
This happened last spring, about 9 months ago. I'm a sales associate for BMW, so my weeks are pretty busy. When I'm not at the dealership, I'm answering my phone. Because of all the phone work involved, sometimes I feel like I have more to do when I'm not at the dealership, as funny as that sounds. Because of the nature of my work, I pretty much have to answer my phone every time it rings, especially when it's an unknown caller. So, as you'd expect, I get a lot of scam calls, but I have no choice but to answer, just in case it's a client or an interested party.
That sucks.
One night, sometime after 10 p.m., my phone started ringing. It was a number my phone didn't recognize. Normally, I would have picked up without thinking, but this time I was already in bed halfway through winding down. Something about how late it was just made me let it ring out. They didn't leave a voicemail. I figured if it was important, they'd leave one. But a few minutes later, the same number called again. I sat up and answered it. I was a little irritated, but I still tried to keep my voice polite, just in case it was someone serious. At first, all I heard was static, just this thick, uneven fuzz. I was about to hang up when I caught something underneath it. A voice. I held the phone closer and listened. It was my voice. I was 100% sure of it. That actually made me freeze up a little bit. After a few seconds, I realized it was more than just a recording of my voice. It was a conversation I'd had earlier that day with a client. Just standard stuff, pricing, availability, setting up a test drive. Nothing sensitive, but it was definitely real. It was definitely my voice. I still don't know if it was the right decision, but I instantly hung up the phone. I sat there for a while, just staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I wasn't panicking, but I definitely wasn't calm either. The best way I can describe what I was feeling was a mix of confusion and unease. My first thought was that maybe it was the client I had talked to earlier. Maybe he had accidentally called me while trying to play back the call or record it for his own notes. I really don't know. It felt like a stretch, but it was the only explanation that didn't immediately spiral into something worse. That didn't really explain why the number was unknown instead of the number he had called from earlier, but it was the best I could come up with. The next morning, I decided to call him back, just for my own sanity. He answered right away and seemed totally normal, friendly even. But when I brought up the call from the night before, he had no idea what I was talking about. He sounded genuinely confused. I apologized for the mix-up and hung up, and for whatever reason, I believed him. The rest of the day was normal. I had a few appointments, followed up with some leads, nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't think too much about the call from the night before, but later that night, around the same time, I got another call. The number wasn't saved in my phone again, but it was different from the number that had called me the night before. This time, I answered it immediately. Exactly what I was dreading happened. It was another static-heavy recording of a conversation I had that day with a client. A different client. A whole different conversation entirely. I hung up again without saying anything. That night was when it really started getting to me, because now it felt intentional, and I noticed something else. The recording didn't include the client's voice. It was only me talking, like a one-sided call. I started wondering if someone had been listening in on my conversations and recording me somehow. I didn't sleep very well that night, as I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I didn't know what to do. I never thought I was a paranoid person, but the next week of my life proved me wrong. Every night for a week, the same thing would happen. I'd get a call from a random number and would listen to a staticky recording of a conversation I'd had that day. I started recording the calls myself. I can't even tell you why. I just thought it was the smart thing to do. By the
You're
third
like, yeah,
or fourth
yeah, the
night,
police
it
and all
started
that.
to wear on me. Not just in a creepy, this is weird kind of way. I mean, it started to actually mess with my head. I couldn't relax, I couldn't think. I'd catch myself looking out the window every few minutes, like someone might be standing out there watching me. I started triple locking my front door. Then I started leaving a light on in every room at night. At one point, I even moved a chair in front of my bedroom door. Looking back, it's really hard for me to explain any of these decisions, but my mind was in a very different place during that period. Anytime my
Yeah.
phone rang, even during the day, I'd step outside and answer it from the safety of my car, where I could see every angle around me. It sounds crazy now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. At one point, I even brought it up with the police. I felt ridiculous doing it, but I figured if someone was monitoring me, I had to at least make some kind of report. The officer I spoke to was polite enough, but I could tell right away they didn't take it seriously. He said they could try looking into the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat or evidence of harassment, there wasn't much they could do. I don't know if they actually
Yeah, it's no
tried to trace the
surprise there.
calls or just filed it away and forgot about it.
Yeah,
Either
definitely
way,
forgot
it didn't
about it.
help. If anything, it made me feel more alone in it. A few days later, though, the calls suddenly stopped. That week of obsessively checking my surroundings and answering calls from my car must have deterred whoever was harassing me. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, but I couldn't relax. If anything, the sudden absence of contact actually caused me to spiral even further into paranoia. My mom is schizophrenic, so I always figured I was predisposed to developing some kind of mental condition, but it was literally happening right before my very eyes. I was becoming one of those reclusive people who think the entire world is spying on them. I ended up getting a brand new
father, like
personal
son.
phone number. It was a massive headache. Switching numbers meant having to reestablish contact with clients, update everything linked to my phone, and risk missing out on people trying to get in touch with me. But I did it anyway. I couldn't shake the feeling that my old number had been compromised somehow. After a few more days of radio silence, the thing I was dreading happened. One night after work, I got another call. It was exactly like the ones before it. I kept my cool, and instead of remaining silent and hanging up, I actually spoke. I said something along the lines of, "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but if it's money you want, I've got it." I went on to say that I'd happily pay to be left alone. I gave the person my address and said I'd be willing to meet. And then, for the first time, there was an actual voice on the other end. It sounded like they were using a voice changer. And all they said was, 11 o'clock, before hanging up. I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would I volunteer my address like that? Honestly,
Yeah,
I can't
exactly,
answer that
why?
question. I was acting irrationally, I know that. But it's impossible for me to explain exactly how my mind was working during that time, so I'm not even gonna bother. The next 4 days were the most traumatic and stressful moments of my life. I'm not sure how much I can even type out without getting too graphic, but here goes.
Oh,
I have a handgun in my house for personal safety. I grabbed it from my room, loaded it, and sat at my kitchen table and waited. I can't even begin to explain all the thoughts that were bouncing around in my head as I sat there. I contemplated a lot of things in those 4 hours. I'd go as far as to say that had it not been for sheer chance, I might not be typing this out right now. Just
Wow.
thinking about that night gives me a sickening
So he
feeling.
would have unalived himself.
11
if the
p.m.
guy
came
turned up.
and went, and no one
Wow.
showed up. There's
Guy
no
really
telling
did
what I
turn
would have done
insane.
had they actually showed up. I ended up sleeping at the kitchen table with the gun in my hand. It was by far the worst night of my life, but thankfully, that was the end of it. I never got another mysterious call again.
Yeah, but now
But that didn't change the fact that that person had done irreparable damage to my mental state. It took me a lot of therapy and time off work to recover fully, and I still get chills thinking about how easily I was almost driven to complete madness. I will never have an explanation for what happened to me. I have no idea how that person recorded my conversations or who they even were. I have no idea why they harassed me or why they stopped for that matter. I've since moved out of that house, but there's not much I can do beyond that. If anything, this experience has made me a lot more fearful of the future. I can't help but think that I'm destined to end up just like my mom. Hopefully getting this out there will help me heal in some way.
Alright, well, that is the end of that one. I'm gonna take a nap. Alright, that is the end of the stream. Subscribe, like, turn on notification bells, all of that stuff. Have a good rest of the week, and yeah, see you next stream. Bye.